The scent of hospital antiseptic hadn't fully left my nostrils. The nurse helped me with the small duffel bag, which held only a few outfits for the baby and my discharge papers. Leo Sterling, my husband of 2 years, stood at the door of the hospital room, head down, scrolling through his phone. I held our son. The little guy was only 5 days old, a soft, warm bundle sleeping soundly in his swaddle. The nurse smiled. "Mr. Sterling, congratulations on your wife's discharge. The baby is very healthy." Only then did Leo look up, shoving his phone into his pocket. His face was blank. He walked over, not to take the baby from my arms, nor to help me, but to grab the ridiculously light duffel bag. "The car's outside. Let's go," he said. I followed him out of the maternity ward. The early autumn wind was a bit chilly, and I subconsciously pulled my son closer. Parked by the curb was the conspicuous black Maybach S-Class, a gift from my father for my 20th birthday. Leo drove it almost exclusively. I expected him to open the door for me and the baby, but he didn't stop. He walked straight past the car, heading towards the city bus stop just outside the hospital gates. I froze, standing in place. "Leo," I called out. He turned back, his brow furrowed, seemingly annoyed at my slow pace. "What are you waiting for?" "Over here." I walked over, holding our son, a sense of dread creeping into my heart. My C-section incision was still throbbing with a dull ache. "Aren't we taking the car?" Leo pointed to the bus schedule. "You take that back." He pulled a few crumpled dollar bills from his pocket and stuffed them into my hand. The cold paper felt alien in my palm. $2.75. It's a straight shot to our neighborhood. Very convenient. My parents and my sister are coming over from their place soon. I have to drive them to that new steakhouse downtown. I already made reservations. Can't be late. I couldn't believe my ears. I looked at the few dollars in my left hand, then back at him. "Leo, I was just discharged. It's my 5th day postpartum. The baby is 5 days old. You want me to take him on a crowded city bus?" He waved his hand impatiently. "Don't be so dramatic. My sister was up and doing chores 3 days after she gave birth. What's wrong with the bus? It's not rush hour. You'll definitely get a seat. Hurry up, don't dawdle. They're almost here." Just then, the Maybach's lights flashed twice, and the engine rumbled to life. I saw his family walking over from the other side of the parking lot. My mother-in-law, Brenda, my sister-in-law, Jessica, and her husband, laughing and talking. They pulled open the car doors and settled in as if it were their own. Brenda didn't even glance in my direction. Leo urged me on. "Go on, the bus is coming. Get some rest when you get home. There should be some leftovers in the fridge. Just heat them up yourself." With that, he turned and walked to the Maybach, got into the driver's seat, and drove off. I watched my $1 million car carry my husband and his entire family away from the hospital without a backward glance, merging into the flow of traffic. And me, Isabella Vance, holding my 5-day-old son, stood in the cool autumn wind, clutching the bus fare in my hand. The bus did arrive, lurching and swaying. It wasn't full, but the air was stale. I took one slow step after another up the stairs and paid the fare. The driver glanced at me, probably noticing my pale face and the infant in my arms, but said nothing. I found a single seat by the window and sat down, carefully protecting my baby's head. The bus started with a jolt, and a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped. The scenery outside blurred past skyscrapers, bustling streets. I thought back on the last 2 years with Leo. I had hidden my identity as a billionaire's daughter, thinking I had found true love. He was wonderful at first, attentive and caring. But ever since I got pregnant, and especially after he made his first million from a project my family had secretly steered his way, his attitude slowly changed. His mother and sister would make veiled comments about how I had married up. The Sterling family wasn't the bastion of love I had imagined. It was just me, Isabella Vance, being utterly blind. The bus stopped at a red light. In the next lane, the familiar Maybach pulled up alongside us. Through the tinted windows, I could faintly see the shadows inside, the movements of people laughing and talking. Leo had his head turned, saying something to Jessica in the passenger seat. A relaxed smile on his face I hadn't seen in a long time. In that instant, my heart turned colder than the autumn wind. It wasn't sadness. It was a profound clarity. a chilling rage. The light turned green. The Maybach sped off, quickly disappearing from view. I looked down at my son's peaceful, sleeping face, his tiny mouth twitching occasionally. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered for a second over a number I had almost never called. Then I pressed it. The phone was answered on the first ring. A deep, steady voice filled with concern came through. "Isabella?" I took a breath, my voice calm but laced with an unshakable resolve. "Dad," I said into the phone. "It's me. Tonight, I want you to ruin Leo Sterling." There were 2 seconds of silence on the other end. I could picture my father, William Vance, his expression like the calm before a hurricane. He didn't ask a single question. He just said 3 words. "Consider it done." The call ended. The bus continued its bumpy journey. The low chatter of other passengers seemed distant. I held my son, watching the ordinary streets fly by, and the cold fire in my heart slowly gave way to a strange sense of peace. I knew my words had lit the fuse. For some people, the world was about to turn upside down. The bus reached my stop. I slowly made my way off, the incision still aching. As I reached the entrance to our apartment complex, before I could even get my keys out, a black Rolls-Royce Cullinan slid silently to a stop beside me. The door opened, and a man in a black suit, white gloves, and a solemn expression got out. He bowed slightly. "Miss Vance, the chairman sent me to pick you and the young master up." It was Arthur, my father's driver of over 20 years. Behind him were 2 professionally dressed young women, likely nurses. They immediately came forward. One carefully took the baby from my arms, while the other supported my elbow with a firm, gentle grip. I said nothing, just nodded, and let them guide me into the car. The leather seats were plush and spacious. The air inside was warm and clean, a world away from the jarring, stuffy bus. Arthur closed the door, and the car pulled away smoothly from the modest apartment complex I had called home for 2 years, all for the sake of a so-called love. The car didn't head back to the apartment I shared with Leo, but drove directly towards the Vance estate in Greenwich. The whole way, Arthur drove in silence, and the 2 nurses quietly attended to their duties, checking the baby and handing me warm water. I leaned back and closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me, but my mind was clearer than ever. The car passed through the grand gates of the estate and drove for some time before stopping in front of the main house. The door was opened, and my father, William Vance, was standing there. He wore a long, dark cashmere sweater, his figure still imposing, but his brow was furrowed with a barely concealed anxiety. He didn't look at anyone else, his eyes fixed first on my face, then on the baby in the nurse's arms. "Dad," I said, my voice a little hoarse. William reached out, not to help me, but to gently touch my shoulder. Then he motioned for the nurse to bring the baby to him. He looked down at his sleeping grandson, his expression a complex mix of love, heartache, and a cold fury that was being forcefully suppressed. "You're home now," he said in a low voice. Then, to the staff, "Take Miss Vance and the baby to their rooms to rest. Have the doctor come immediately for a checkup." I was escorted into the familiar yet somewhat alien mansion. The marble floors shone like mirrors, and the enormous crystal chandelier cast a soft, warm light. The air held a faint scent of sandalwood. This was the world I, Isabella Vance, was supposed to inhabit. Back in my old room, everything was as I had left it, but now filled with brand new baby supplies. The family doctor arrived quickly and gave me and the baby a thorough examination, confirming we just needed rest and were otherwise fine. The nurses helped me change into comfortable clothes and brought me a nutritious meal. Once I was settled and only my father and I were left in the room, he sat on the sofa opposite me. "Now, tell me what happened. Don't leave out a single word." Holding a glass of warm milk, I started from my discharge from the hospital, talking about the bus fare, about Leo's casual decision to go to a steakhouse, and about seeing them from the bus window. My tone was calm, as if I were telling someone else's story, without any embellishment, just stating the facts. William listened, his face impassive, but the knuckles of the hand resting on his knee had turned white. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then took out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. The call was answered immediately. A crisp, professional male voice said, "Mr. Vance, has it started?" William asked. "Yes, sir. We've contacted all the Series A and B principal investors in Sterling Ventures and conveyed the position of Vance Industries. As of now, 3 have confirmed they will pull their funding immediately. The others are wavering. As for the banks, President Miller has been informed and stated he will be reassessing Mr. Sterling's credit line. Furthermore, we found that a major project Leo Sterling just secured last week is with a company whose majority shareholder is a distant relative of Mrs. Vance's family. They just called Judong to say the partnership is suspended indefinitely." "Excellent." William's voice was devoid of emotion. Let him experience what it feels like to fall from the clouds. "I want the name Sterling Ventures to disappear from the investment world within 48 hours. "Understood, sir." The call ended. William looked at me. "You heard?" I nodded. This was the power of the Vance family. No shouting was needed, just a stated position, and a seemingly solid business empire could start to crumble in an instant. "You insisted on marrying him, on hiding your identity. I allowed it." William's voice held a trace of fatigue and pain. "I thought you saw something in the man, that he would be good to you. It seems my daughter was treated like a doormat." I looked down at the milk in my cup. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was so foolish." "As long as you've learned from it." William stood up, walked over, and patted my head. The gesture made my eyes well up, taking me back to my childhood. "From now on, this family is your and your son's fortress. No one will ever bully you again. Do whatever you want. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you." Just then, my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen was Leo. I glanced at my father. He nodded for me to answer. I pressed the button. Before I could even put the phone to my ear, Leo's impatient voice, mixed with a noisy background, came through. "Isabella, where the hell are you? My mom and sister got home and said the place is a mess and there's no food. Where are you? Get back here and cook. You think you're some kind of princess now? Just because you had a baby? Stop being so melodramatic." I took a deep breath and spoke into the phone, my voice perfectly calm. "Leo, my son and I are at my father's house, and from today, that place is no longer my home." There was a stunned silence on the other end. The background noise quieted, as if he had covered the receiver or moved somewhere quieter. A few seconds later, his voice came back, laced with disbelief and suppressed anger. "Isabella, what are you talking about? Your father's house? Which father? Your dad who lives in some small town upstate? What are you doing taking my son back there? Get back here right now. Stop causing trouble." I could almost picture his scowling face, probably thinking this was just me throwing a tantrum. I couldn't be bothered to waste another word on him. I hung up and turned off my phone. The world was quiet again. William watched my actions with a flicker of approval in his eyes. "It seems I don't need to teach you what to do." I looked out the window at the meticulously manicured gardens of the estate. "Dad, this is just the beginning. What he owes me, what he owes our son. I'm going to make him pay it all back, with interest." A nurse knocked gently on the door to remind me it was time to feed the baby. I walked over to the bassinet. The little one had woken up at some point and was looking around this new, magnificent environment with his big, dark eyes, not crying or making a fuss. I picked him up, feeling the warmth of his soft little body. Downstairs, a phone began to ring. It was probably some frantic investor or bank manager who had finally traced the call back to the source, looking for the suddenly all-powerful man who held their fate in his hands. Tonight, many people would be losing sleep. I slept as if I was making up for months of lost rest. When I woke, sunlight was peeking through the heavy curtains. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of a humidifier. I propped myself up. The incision was still sore, but much better than yesterday. A nurse in a pale blue uniform entered quietly. Seeing I was awake, she smiled. "Miss Vance, you're awake. The young master has been fed and changed. He's sleeping soundly in the nursery now. Would you like to see him?" I nodded. She led me to the adjoining nursery. It was warm and comfortable, with constant temperature and humidity. My son was lying in an exquisite crib, his little face rosy, his breathing even. Looking at him, The softest part of my heart felt full. This was the life a newborn deserved, not being jostled on a city bus. The chairman and Mrs. Vance said you should rest more. Breakfast is ready. Would you like to eat downstairs or have it brought up? The nurse asked softly. I'll go down, I said. I need to move around. After washing up and changing into the soft loungewear a maid had prepared, I walked slowly down the spiral staircase. The long dining table was already set with a beautiful breakfast spread, both American and continental options. My mother, Catherine Vance, always elegant and poised, was sitting near the head of the table, reading news on her tablet. Hearing my footsteps, she looked up. Isabella, come, sit, she beckoned, her eyes full of undisguised heartache. How are you feeling? Does the incision still hurt? Did you take the medicine the doctor prescribed? I sat down beside her. Much better, Mom. I'll take it after I eat. My mother took my hand and patted it gently. It's good you're home. It's good. I heard the gist of it from your father last night. You've really suffered, my child. She sighed, her eyes a little red. I told you from the beginning that Leo Sterling didn't seem reliable, but you wouldn't listen. Well, there's no use talking about that now. Don't worry. With your father and me here, we won't let you or the baby suffer even the slightest bit of injustice again. Just then, William, dressed in workout clothes, walked in from outside, a light sheen of sweat on his forehead. Seeing me, his expression softened. You look better than yesterday. He took his seat at the head of the table. A maid immediately brought him a hot towel and tea. He wiped his hands and got straight to the point, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. Regarding Leo's company, the first investor sent their official withdrawal notice at 3 a.m. The bank is sending a team to his office at 9 a.m. sharp to reassess his assets, and that big project he was counting on to save him is officially dead. I picked up a spoon and slowly stirred the oatmeal in my bowl, feeling no emotion, almost wanting to laugh. The $3 bus ride, the cold leftovers, and the financial ruin he was now facing, the contrast was ironically bitter. Did he call again last night? I asked. William sipped his tea. He called the house line. Around 1 a.m., the butler answered, said his tone was very aggressive, asking where you were, demanding you come back immediately. The butler, as instructed, simply replied that Miss Vance and the young master were resting and could not be disturbed, then hung up. I could imagine Leo's fury. He probably still thought I was just having a fit, running back to my small-town family. His expression, when he finally discovered the truth, would be priceless. Halfway through breakfast, the house phone rang again. The butler answered, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver and looked at William. Sir, it's Mr. Leo Sterling's father. My mother's brow instantly furrowed. William wiped his mouth with his napkin. Ask him what he wants, he said coolly. The butler relayed the message, then reported back. He says he'd like to speak with you or Mrs. Vance about Miss Isabella and the baby. He says there might be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? William let out a short, cold laugh that seemed to chill the air in the dining room. You tell him that my daughter, 5 days after giving birth, was forced by his wonderful son to take a $3 bus while holding her newborn, and his son was driving my car to take his entire family out for a steak dinner. There is no misunderstanding to discuss. Tell him to control his son. The butler relayed the message verbatim. The person on the other end seemed to plead urgently, but the butler simply replied with polite indifference, I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. The chairman is having breakfast and cannot be disturbed, before hanging up. That swift, clean rejection was more powerful than 100 of my tears. I took a sip of my juice, the warmth spreading through me with a strange sense of security. After breakfast, my father was heading to his study. As he stood up, he glanced at me. Isabella, come with me for a moment. I followed him into the study. On the massive mahogany desk lay a file. William pushed it towards me. Take a look at this. I picked it up. It was a detailed asset report and equity structure analysis of Sterling Ventures. Several key points were circled in red, all of them fatal weaknesses. The last few pages outlined the commercial attacks my father had already launched. They were swift and merciless. Dad, I looked up at him. William sat in his large armchair, his gaze sharp. Look closely. This is the man you chose, and this is his so-called empire, which looks grand but is fragile as glass. My daughter needs to have vision. You have to be ruthless when necessary. Put away your needless sentimentality and memories. From now on, every decision you make affects the future of you and your son." He placed a pen on the file. "If you think this isn't enough, or if you have other ideas, you can bring them up now. The family's resources are at your disposal." I looked at the file, at the cold numbers and clauses that would soon become a tangible force, dragging Leo Sterling into the abyss. The rage that had been suppressed since yesterday seemed to find an outlet. I put the file down without touching the pen and met my father's gaze. "Dad, proceed with your plan. I trust you." I paused, then added, "But when he's at his most desperate, I want him to know, face to face, why this is all happening. Not because his business failed, but simply because he made me take that $3 bus." A flicker of satisfaction crossed William's eyes. He nodded. "Fine. You can decide how and when to let him know." Leaving the study, sunlight streamed through the long hallway windows, casting bright spots on the floor. I went to the nursery. My son was awake, being held by a nurse, his big eyes looking around curiously. I took him in my arms and walked to the window. Outside was the vast garden of the Vance estate, manicured lawns, beautiful flowers, and the distant glimmer of a man-made lake. This was my world, the world my son should grow up in. A world Leo Sterling and his scheming family could never even imagine. My phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number, but the content was familiar. "Hey, I heard you were back in town. It's Dylan. Grandpa wanted me to ask if you're coming to dinner tonight. We all miss you." Dylan, my cousin, my uncle's son, the vast network of the Vance family was already in motion. I replied with one word, "Coming." The nursery door was knocked gently. A nurse peeked in. "Miss Vance, there's a package for you downstairs. It requires your signature." I was surprised. Who would be sending me something here? Holding my son, I went downstairs. The butler was standing in the living room, holding a medium-sized cardboard box, his expression a bit grim. "Miss Vance, this just arrived. The sender is listed as Mr. Leo Sterling." The butler placed the box on the coffee table. Leo was sending me a package? At a time like this? I frowned. The butler opened the box. Inside, there were no dangerous items, just a scattered collection of my things. The old sweatpants I used to wear around the apartment, a cheap drugstore skincare set, and a few of my pregnancy books. On top was a folded piece of paper. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was Leo's messy scrawl, full of impatience and blame. "Isabella, are you done with this tantrum? Disappearing with the baby? My mom and sister are furious. Take this stuff of yours back. The apartment is a mess. I want you back here by the end of the day, or you'll regret it. Don't forget, you are Leo Sterling's wife, and that son is a Sterling. Not a single word of concern, not a shred of guilt, only commands and threats. He hadn't even considered why I had left, or where I could possibly go with a newborn. In his eyes, I was just a possession that was causing him trouble. I looked at the note and suddenly found it laughable. How did I ever mistake this arrogance for confidence? I was truly blind. "Get rid of it," I said, crumpling the note and tossing it in the trash. I pointed at the box. "Donate the clothes and books. Throw out the skincare." "Yes, Miss Vance." The butler immediately had a maid take the box away. Just then, my mother walked in from the dining room. She must have heard the commotion. She glanced at the crumpled paper in the trash but asked nothing. She simply took my arm. "Isabella, don't waste your anger on irrelevant people. Your uncles and their families are all coming for dinner tonight to welcome you and the baby home. Your cousin Dylan just called to ask what you like to eat so the kitchen can prepare it specially." I nodded, the small bit of annoyance quickly replaced by warmth. This was family. Compared to them, Leo and his clan seemed all the more pathetic and insignificant. That evening, the Vance estate was brilliantly lit. A long table was set in the dining room. My two uncles and their families had all arrived. My cousins gathered around, greeting me with concern, all eager to hold the baby. The atmosphere was warm and harmonious. No one mentioned Leo. No one asked why I was suddenly back. It was an unspoken understanding. They showed me only their warmest side. During dinner, we chatted about daily life, about business, about interesting news. My father sat at the head of the table, speaking little, but whenever he did, his words were sharp and to the point. Somehow, the conversation turned to recent fluctuations in the investment world. My second uncle, who managed a significant investment division under Vance Industries, took a sip of wine and mentioned casually. Speaking of which, there was some minor news in the circles today. A company called Sterling Ventures, I think, heard they lost 3 major investors in one morning. Bank credit line is frozen too, and that big land deal they were about to close in the West End also fell through. The speed of this collapse is like a rocket. My third uncle chimed in, with a hint of sarcasm. Young people with unstable foundations who take steps that are too big are bound to fall sooner or later. But for it to be this sudden is rare. Wonder which big shot they offended. My cousin Dylan, fresh out of college and interning at the company, was more direct. I heard that the boss is just a terrible person. He even mistreated his own wife and child and ended up kicking a hornet's nest. Her family is not to be trifled with. As he spoke, he snuck a glance at me. The table fell silent for a moment. Everyone looked at me, their eyes filled with sympathy, but more so with an unspoken understanding and support. It was then that my father finally put down his chopsticks. He wiped his mouth with his napkin, his tone as bland as if he were critiquing a dish. In business, character is more important than competence. If someone lacks basic responsibility and decency, even if they achieve temporary success, it won't last. Bankruptcy and liquidation are inevitable. He looked at me. Isabella, what do you think? I looked up, meeting the gazes of all my relatives. I took a sip of water, my voice clear and calm. Dad is right. You reap what you sow. As soon as I said that, knowing smiles appeared on everyone's faces. My second uncle laughed heartily. All right. Let's not talk. Here's to Isabella and the little one's safe return home. Cheers. The lively atmosphere returned. I knew that beneath this warmth and harmony, a financial strangulation of Leo Sterling was being carried out efficiently and ruthlessly by the very relatives who were now making casual small talk. He was probably still frantically trying to save his company, begging for help everywhere, completely unaware that his gravediggers were sitting around this very table, laughing and chatting. And what was Leo's family doing at this moment? In the Sterling's 3-bedroom apartment, the atmosphere was anything but relaxed. Leo paced frantically in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice hoarse with anxiety. Mr. Johnson, please listen to me. Those are just rumors. Our company's operations are completely normal. Why are you pulling out? We had a deal. Hello? The other end had clearly disconnected. Leo, furious, almost smashed his phone. He turned to his parents and sister, who were sitting on the sofa with equally grim faces. What the hell is going on? I wake up and everything's changed. Investors are pulling out. The bank is calling in loans. Even the project I had in the bag is gone. Leo clutched his hair. I've made hundreds of calls, and all those guys who used to be my buddies either don't pick up or just give me the runaround. Jessica pursed her lips. What else could it be? You must have offended someone important. I told you to be more careful. His mother, Brenda, chimed in. That's right, Leo. Did you do something you shouldn't have? Why else would they target you right now? Leo snapped back. Who could I have offended? I've been working my tail off. He suddenly remembered something, his face turning even paler. Could it be? Isabella? Does her small-town dad have this kind of power? Jessica scoffed. Get real. With her family's background? What powerful people could they possibly know? It's probably just a coincidence. Your luck's run out. The real question is, what do we do now? We're all counting on you. If your company goes under, we'll all be out on the street. His father sighed, chain-smoking in silence. Leo ran a hand through his messy hair and picked up his phone again. No, I have to call President Miller at the bank again. He has to give me an explanation. His fingers trembled as he dialed. And the father of the woman they were dismissing as a small-town girl was at that moment putting down his wine glass and saying gently to my cousin, Dylan, tomorrow at the office, I want you to compile a list of every company that has had any business dealings, even preliminary discussions, with Sterling Ventures. Send it to your uncle." "Yes, Grandpa," Dylan answered brightly. The welcome home dinner, bathed in warm light and family laughter, was coming to an end. And I knew with certainty that hundreds of miles away, another feast, Leo Sterling's bankruptcy feast, was just beginning. The appetizers had just been served, and he was already about to be sick before even tasting the wine. The day after the welcome home dinner, I woke up unusually early. Perhaps being back where I truly belonged had put my mind at ease, and even my incision felt much better. The nurse came in holding the little one, who was full of energy after his morning feeding. "The young master is getting more active every day," she said with a smile. I took my son. He waved his little fists and made cooing sounds, his big dark eyes curiously observing me. This peace and contentment were things I had never experienced in the cramped Sterling apartment, where I had to watch everyone's expressions, and even using a premium diaper for the baby would earn me a lecture from my mother-in-law. Those days were truly gone for good. After breakfast, my father was about to head to his study as usual. Before leaving, he glanced at me and said casually, "Isabella, if you're bored, you can sit in the sunroom next to my study. It's quiet and has a good view." I understood his meaning. He wanted me to witness, or rather, overhear how the gears of revenge were turning with precision. I nodded. Okay. The sunroom was indeed quiet. A floor-to-ceiling window faced the estate's front lawn and a portion of the driveway. I curled up on a soft sofa with a cup of warm milk and a book, though my attention wasn't really on the pages. A vintage-style telephone sat on a corner table. It would ring occasionally, and either the butler or my father's assistant would answer. Sure enough, before long, the phone rang. The butler picked it up, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver and looked at William, who was reading a financial report on another sofa. "Sir, it's President Zhang from Apex Bank." William didn't even look up, just grunted in acknowledgement. The butler understood and spoke into the phone. "President Zhang, good morning. The chairman is busy at the moment. We are aware of the matter you mentioned. Please proceed according to protocol." "Yes, the risk assessment must be strict." "Of course. Goodbye." The call was brief and efficient. After hanging up, the butler reported calmly, "Apex Bank has officially initiated an emergency post-loan review of Mr. Sterling's company. They are requiring him to submit updated financial statements and collateral assessment reports by 10 a.m. tomorrow." William turned a page of the report, his tone flat. "He won't be able to produce them. The previous reports were inflated, and the collateral has long been insufficient." I took a sip of milk, imagining Leo's reaction to this notice from the bank. He was probably furious, yet desperately scrambling to fabricate the documents. The phone rang again. This time it was my father's executive assistant. The report was even more direct. "Mr. Vance, we've just confirmed that the last two potential investors for Sterling Ventures officially terminated negotiations half an hour ago. Additionally, their largest supplier has halted raw material shipments and is demanding payment for the previous batch before resuming cooperation." "I see," was all William said. The assistant continued. "Also, we found that Leo Sterling personally has several unsecured loans and large credit card debts. We have notified the relevant financial institutions to monitor them closely." "Good. Make it clean," William said before hanging up. The sunroom returned to silence, broken only by the soft rustle of my book and the occasional birdsong from outside. The sunlight was warm and pleasant. Everything was happening so quietly, yet with the force of a thunderbolt. Leo's world was likely in chaos, while the epicenter of the storm was a picture of calm. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number, in Leo's characteristically impatient and accusatory tone. "Isabella, what the hell are you playing at? The company's in trouble. Is this your doing? Who is your father? Call me back now." I looked at the text, feeling no desire to reply. Only now did he think to ask who I was? Only now did he realize the problem might stem from me? It was laughably slow. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Putting my phone down, I walked to the window. In the garden below, gardeners were meticulously trimming the hedges. Everything was in perfect order. A black sedan pulled up to the main house. A middle-aged man in a suit carrying a briefcase got out and was respectfully led inside by the butler. He was likely here to handle some legal or financial matter. I suddenly remembered that when I married Leo, to avoid pressuring him, I hadn't even signed a prenuptial agreement. Looking back, I was so foolish, but it didn't matter. The Vance family's legal team would handle everything. What was mine? He would be forced to return, with interest. Miss Vance, a nurse came in gently. It's time for the young master's massage. I turned my gaze away from the window and walked back to the sofa. My son's healthy development was far more important than watching the downfall of a pathetic clown. I picked him up, looked into his pure, innocent eyes, and whispered, "Look, baby, the sun is so beautiful outside. All those messy people and things have nothing to do with us anymore." The little one seemed to understand, breaking into a toothless grin and smiling at me. At that moment, Leo's world was anything but sunny. In his office, papers were scattered everywhere, the ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. His eyes were bloodshot as he yelled into the phone, "Mr. Lee, we've worked together for so many years. Can't you give me a little more time? Just 1 week. I promise I'll pay you in 1 week," the person on the other end said helplessly. "Leo, it's not that I don't want to help. I've heard the rumors. You know who you've offended. I'm running a small business here. I can't afford this risk. I'm sorry." The call was disconnected again. Leo slammed his phone on the desk with a loud bang. He slumped into his chair, running his hands through his hair, letting out a desperate growl. "Who is it? Who is doing this to me?" There was a knock on the door. His secretary peeked in, her face pale. "Mr. Sterling, bad news. The IRS is here. They said they received an anonymous tip and are here to audit the last 3 years of our books." Leo's head snapped up, his face drained of all color. The secretary hesitated, then added, "Also, Mr. Sterling, your mother and sister have been calling the front desk again. They want to know when you're coming home. They said they're almost out of money and need you to figure something out." Leo closed his eyes, feeling the entire world spin and crumble around him. In less than 48 hours, he had gone from a dynamic young entrepreneur to a pariah, besieged by creditors. The devastating blow left him with almost no strength left to be angry. He probably still didn't understand that it had all started with a single $3 bus ride. After my son's massage, he comfortably drifted off to sleep again. The nurse gently carried him back to the nursery. I was leaning on the sofa, about to pick up my book, when there was a soft knock on the sunroom door. The butler entered, a hint of helplessness on his face. He first bowed to my father, then turned to me. "Miss Vance, the security gate reports that Mr. Leo Sterling's mother and sister are here. They are insisting on seeing you." I raised an eyebrow. "They were here?" Faster than I expected. It seemed the fire on Leo's end was burning hot enough to force them out. William didn't even lift his eyes from his report. "Reason?" he asked coolly. The butler replied respectfully, "They say they've come to visit you and the young master. They also said that, since you're all family, any misunderstanding should be cleared up face to face." Family? I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. When they were ordering me around and making snide remarks during my postpartum recovery, they certainly didn't treat me like family. Now that the company was about to collapse, suddenly we were family again. William finally looked up from his report and turned to me. "Isabella, do you want to see them?" I put down my book and walked to the window. From here, I could faintly see a plain-looking car parked outside the estate's imposing iron gates, a stark contrast to the surroundings. 2 figures were pacing anxiously beside it, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Jessica. "See them? Why not?" I turned around, my tone light. "But let's not have them in the house. Ask them to wait in the gazebo on the front lawn. I'll be down in a minute." The butler hesitated, glancing at William. William nodded. "Yes, Miss Vance, I'll arrange it." After the butler left, I said to my father, "Dad, I'm going down to meet them." William grunted in agreement, adding, "Arthur will be nearby. If you need the area cleared, just give him a signal." I smiled but said nothing. I wouldn't need to clear the area to deal with these two. I went to my room, changed into a comfortable but well-made loungewear set, and walked downstairs with a fresh face. The estate's front lawn was vast, with a beautiful Chinese-style gazebo in the middle. My mother-in-law and Jessica were seated there, looking awkward and out of place. Their eyes darted around, taking in the luxurious surroundings with a mixture of greed and intimidation. I walked over slowly and sat on the stone bench opposite them. As expected, Arthur was standing under a nearby colonnade, looking casual but with his full attention on us. "Isabella, you're finally here." Brenda forced a wide smile as soon as she saw me, trying to take my hand, which I subtly avoided. A flicker of embarrassment crossed her face, but she quickly recovered. "Oh my, look at you. You look so much better now that you're back with your family. This place is so big and beautiful." Jessica quickly chimed in, her tone unprecedentedly fawning. "Yes, Isabella, you just left with the baby without saying a word. You had us so worried. Mom and I couldn't sleep all night." I picked up the herbal tea a maid had just brought, blew on it gently, and didn't respond. Seeing her flattery wasn't working, Brenda had to get to the point. She put on a sorrowful expression. "Isabella, look, we're all family. Can't we just talk things out? Leo, his company is having some problems, but that's what marriage is about, right? For better or for worse. For you to run back to your family with the baby at a time like this, it's just distracting him even more." Jessica nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Isabella, I have to say, what you did was really not thoughtful. It's hard for men out there trying to build a career. As women, we should be supporting them at home. Come back with us. Mom made you some chicken soup to help you recover." I put down my teacup and watched their performance, finding it utterly absurd. Go back? Go back where? To the home where I was forced to take the bus 5 days after giving birth? Or to the home where there wasn't even a hot meal waiting for me, just cold leftovers? Brenda's face stiffened. "Oh, that was all a misunderstanding. Leo was wrong that day. I've already scolded him for it. He was just in a hurry to get to a business meeting and wasn't thinking straight." "Not thinking straight?" I cut her off, my voice turning cold. "He drove my car to take all of you out for a steak dinner, while I had to take a $3 bus with my 5-day-old son. You call that not thinking straight?" Jessica couldn't help but raise her voice. "Isabella, are you ever going to let that go? It was just a bus ride. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Now Leo's company is about to collapse, and as his wife, instead of helping him, you're just dredging up old scores. How can you be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I looked at her and suddenly smiled. "Jessica, do you remember how your in-laws treated you when you gave birth? Constant soups, a month-long stay at a postpartum recovery center. But when it's my turn, I deserve to take the bus and eat leftovers? Are there different classes of daughters-in-law in the Sterling family?" Jessica's face turned red, then pale. She was speechless. Seeing this, Brenda quickly tried to smooth things over, her tone pleading. "Isabella, it was my fault. I apologize to you. It was all our fault. But for the baby's sake, you can't just watch Leo go bankrupt, can you? You don't want the baby to grow up without a father to rely on." "Rely on?" I stood up, looking down at them. "Rely on him for what? To make my son take the bus in the future? Or to rely on him when he can't even afford formula soon?" I walked to the edge of the gazebo, looking out at the manicured gardens. My voice was not loud, but every word was clear. "Don't you worry. My son will have the best support in the world. As for Leo Sterling, whether he goes bankrupt or ends up begging on the streets, it has nothing to do with me or my son." I turned back to face their instantly pale faces. "And this is my home. You are not welcome here. Don't come back. Butler, escort our guests out." The butler, who had been waiting nearby, immediately stepped forward and made a polite but firm this-way gesture to the dumbfounded mother and daughter. Brenda tried to say something else, but Jessica grabbed her, shot me a hateful glare, and muttered through clenched teeth, "Isabella, don't be so smug. We'll see about this." I watched their pathetic figures being practically escorted off the estate, feeling no satisfaction, only a cold calm. This was just the beginning. They would soon learn what we'll see really meant. Back in the main house, William was still in the sunroom, as if the little drama I had just experienced was less important than a single number in his financial report. He looked up at me. "Handled?" I nodded. "Just a couple of flies. Shooed them away." He closed the report, a rare, faint smile touching his lips, Good attitude. Keep it up. Watching my son grow and change every day, taking walks with my mother in the garden, listening to her stories of old society families, I almost forgot about the existence of Leo Sterling and his family. Until one afternoon, I was in the solarium with my son, enjoying the sun, when the butler walked in again, his expression grave. This time, he looked directly at me. Miss Vance, Mr. Leo Sterling is at the front gate. He's insisting on seeing you. He seems very agitated. The butler chose his words carefully. I gently patted my son's back. He was sleeping soundly in my arms. Is he alone? Yes, just him. He parked his car far away and walked to the gate, the butler added. The guards say he looks very disheveled. I nodded. It was to be expected. With his company on the brink of collapse, creditors at his door, and his family blaming him, it would be strange if he still looked presentable. Does my father know? The chairman has been informed. His instruction was for you to handle it as you see fit, the butler replied respectfully. I thought for a moment. See him? Of course I would. Some things needed to be said clearly. Some scenes needed to be witnessed to be truly satisfying. Let him wait, I said coolly. After I've fed the baby and he's had his nap. Yes, Miss Vance. The butler understood and withdrew. I took my time. I calmly fed my son, changed his diaper, and watched him fall asleep again. Only then did I get up, change into a slightly more formal dress, and even had a maid help me with my hair. The woman in the mirror had a healthy complexion and calm eyes, with the soft glow of new motherhood but also an unapproachable air. This was a far cry from the timid, approval-seeking Isabella of the Sterling household. I walked slowly to a small balcony on the second floor that overlooked the estate's main gate. It was far, but with binoculars, one could see the situation clearly. I didn't use any. With my naked eye, I could see a lone figure pacing back and forth outside the ornate iron gates, looking small and anxious. It was Leo. He wore a wrinkled shirt, his hair was a mess, and the carefully crafted image of a successful professional was completely gone. He kept looking up towards the main house, his eyes filled with anxiety, anger, and perhaps a sliver of fear and desperation he himself wouldn't admit. I watched for a few minutes, found it uninteresting, and turned to go downstairs. I said to the waiting butler, "Let him wait in the gatehouse security office. I'll go there." I didn't want him stepping foot in the main house, tainting the air. The gatehouse was sufficient. When I arrived, Leo had already been let in by the guards. The office was small and simply furnished. He was sitting on a hard wooden chair, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. At the sound of my footsteps, his head shot up. The moment he saw me, his eyes flashed with a complex mixture of resentment, accusation, and the desperation of a cornered animal. He jumped to his feet. "Isabella, you finally decided to see me." I ignored him, stopping at the doorway and nodding to Arthur and another bodyguard behind me. They took up positions on either side of the door like two immovable statues. Only then did I walk in slowly and sit on the chair furthest from him, a small coffee table between us. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice as flat as if I were asking about the weather. My attitude enraged him. He lunged forward, as if to grab me, but was forced back by the cold glare of the bodyguards. He was breathing heavily, his voice low but unable to conceal his fury. "Isabella, stop playing dumb with me. The company's problems. Was it you? Is it your father pulling the strings behind the scenes?" I tilted my head, looking at him. "Leo, your own mismanagement led to your company's problems. Why are you blaming me? Mismanagement? Bullshit!" Leo roared. "Everything was fine until that day. The day I made you take the bus. Suddenly, all my investors pulled out. The bank called in my loans. All my projects collapsed. There's no such thing as a coincidence like that. Tell me, who is your father? Who is he?" He finally asked the question. I looked at his face, twisted with agitation, and suddenly felt a sense of pity for him. "Does it matter who my father is?" I said coolly. "What matters, Leo, is that when you made me take that $3 bus, when you drove my car to take your entire family to a steakhouse, did you ever stop to think about who times I times am?" Leo was stunned, then became even more agitated. "For that? Just because I made you take the bus once? Isabella, are you serious? I'm your husband. What good does my company collapsing do for you? For your son? Husband? I repeated the word as if I'd heard the funniest joke. The moment you pushed me onto that bus, you stopped being my husband. As for what good it does, I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawns and the distant, shimmering lake. My voice was quiet, but every word was crystal clear. My son will grow up in an environment like this. He will receive the best education, have the best of everything. That is the greatest good. As for whether your company's collapse will affect him, I turned to face him, a cold smile on my lips. Do you really think he needs your crumbling company now? Leo's face turned deathly pale. He looked at me in disbelief, then at the opulent estate outside the window, which was beyond his wildest imagination, and then at the two imposing bodyguards at the door. A terrible thought, one he had never considered, finally shattered his pathetic worldview. You, your family. His voice trembled, unable to form a complete sentence. I had no interest in wasting any more time with him. I walked towards the door. As I passed him, I didn't stop, leaving him with one final sentence. Leo, sign the divorce papers and prepare to return my car and everything else that belongs to me. Otherwise, what you stand to lose will be far more than you can ever imagine. I walked out of the office. Arthur immediately closed the door, shutting out any sound that might have come from within. The sun was warm on my skin. I took a deep breath of the fresh air of the estate and said to Arthur, "From now on, if he comes again, just have him removed. No need to inform me. Yes, Miss Vance." I walked back towards the main house. Whether Leo was having a breakdown, roaring in fury, or slumping in despair in that small office, it had nothing to do with me anymore. I went straight to the nursery. My son had just woken up and was being held by a nurse, cooing and playing by himself. When he saw me, he waved his little hands and broke into a toothless smile. I took him in my arms, feeling the warm, solid weight of his little body, and the last ripple of emotion, stirred by seeing Leo, completely subsided. Wasting energy on people like him was pointless. My time and energy should be spent on more worthy things, like watching my son grow up healthy and happy. That evening at dinner, my father mentioned casually, "After Leo left this afternoon, he called his father." I added some vegetables to my plate, showing no reaction. My mother, however, responded with a dismissive tone. "His father? The one who just chain smokes whenever there's a problem? What did he say?" William calmly sipped his soup. What could he say? Pleading for his son, saying he knows he was wrong, hoping we would be merciful and give him a way out. He also mentioned doing it for the child's sake. I put down my fork and wiped my mouth with a napkin. For the child's sake? When they were mistreating me, did they ever think about the child's sake? When I was on that bus, wasn't my son suffering with me? William looked at me with approval. I had my assistant reply, "The Vance family has always acted with reason. He should control his own son and return what is owed before discussing anything else." That response effectively shut down any possibility of negotiation. I nodded and said no more. It was too late for apologies. The moment those crumpled dollar bills were stuffed into my hand, this outcome was sealed. The next 2 days were quiet. Leo seemed to have finally given up. No more calls, no more visits. But I knew this was just the calm before the storm. A person as selfish and prideful as him would never give up so easily, especially now that he probably had an inkling of my true family background. Desperation and resentment would eat away at him, forcing him to do something even more irrational. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, I was arranging flowers with my mother in the conservatory when the butler hurried in, his face more serious than before. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, Miss Vance," he said quickly. "We just received a call from the community security and the local police precinct. Mr. Sterling's mother and sister, along with 2 other women who look like hired protesters, are at the main entrance to our neighborhood. They've put up a banner and are causing a scene." "A scene?" My mother's brow furrowed. "What are they trying to do? What does the banner say?" The butler seemed hesitant to say, but reported truthfully, "The banner says, Vance family patriarch lacks morals, forces son-in-law to bankruptcy, steals grandchild, heaven will not forgive." They're also using a megaphone, shouting that you Miss Vance are a gold digger who conspired with your family to ruin your husband and are trying to steal the Sterling family's heir. My mother's face turned pale with anger. She slammed the gardening shears on the table. Shameless. Absolutely shameless. When they were mistreating my daughter, did they ever think about heaven's justice? Now they have the audacity to come here and play the victim. William, however, was calm. He put down his watering can and looked at me. Isabella, what do you think? I put down the lily I was holding. I felt no anger, only a tired sense of predictability. This was all they were capable of, making a scene, playing the victim, trying to manipulate public opinion. Call the police, I said calmly. Charge them with disturbing the peace and slander. Have our lawyers follow up. Detain them if necessary. Fine them if necessary. Also, notify a few friendly media outlets. A friendly reminder that they should be careful about what kind of stories they run, lest they find themselves in a lawsuit. A barely perceptible smile touched William's lips. He nodded at the butler. Do as Miss Vance says. Also, tell community security to increase patrols. Anyone related to the Sterling family is not allowed within a 3-mile radius of the neighborhood entrance. Yes, sir. I'll see to it at once. The butler left. My mother was still fuming. We're letting them off that easily? They should be taught a real lesson. I took my mother's arm. Mom, stooping to their level is beneath us. Letting the law and public opinion teach them a lesson is far more effective and more satisfying than getting our own hands dirty. Events proved me right. Less than half an hour later, the butler returned to report that the police had arrived and taken Brenda, Jessica, and the 2 hired protesters into custody on suspicion of public nuisance and defamation. They had tried to resist at first, but quieted down after a stern warning from the officers. Jessica's face reportedly turned white when she heard that the Vance family's legal team was on their way to the station to press charges for slander. At the same time, several influential business and social media outlets published brief articles. While not mentioning names, the content pointed directly to the family of a newly bankrupt entrepreneur who, unable to accept their business failure, had resorted to hiring protesters and displaying banners outside a high-end residential community to slander their in-laws. The behavior was described as deplorable and shameful. The comment sections were even more telling. Speculation and amateur sleuthing quickly pieced together the story, exposing Leo Sterling and his family's dirty laundry for all to see. Public opinion was overwhelmingly against them, filled with ridicule and condemnation. The Sterlings had tried to use a public tantrum to gain sympathy and apply pressure, but had only succeeded in humiliating themselves and accelerating their own demise. That evening, I received a message from my lawyer. The pressure had finally gotten to Leo. Through his attorney, he expressed his willingness to negotiate the divorce settlement and agreed to return the Maybach and my other premarital assets. I replied to my lawyer, "Our terms remain the same. Full custody of our son goes to me. He leaves with nothing and must sign an agreement permanently waiving his visitation rights. Give him 24 hours to consider. After that, the consequences will be on him." A week later, my personal lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Davis, came to the estate to give me an update. We met in the solarium, with the bright autumn sun streaming in. Miss Davis took several documents out of her briefcase and placed them on the wicker table in front of me. "Miss Vance, Mr. Sterling has signed the draft of the divorce agreement and this asset return confirmation." Her tone was professional and calm. "The agreement is essentially as you requested. You have full custody of your son, and he has voluntarily waived his visitation rights permanently. Regarding assets, he agrees to return the Maybach sedan and all personal items you owned before the marriage that were left at his residence. The list is here. Furthermore, given that his company's operations during the marriage heavily relied on resources and connections you provided through discrete channels, after an evaluation and calculation, he has agreed to pay an additional compensation sum." Miss Davis stated a figure an astronomical amount for the current Leo Sterling. It meant that not only would he walk away with nothing, but he would also be saddled with a massive debt. I picked up my tea, blowing on it gently. He agreed so readily? That doesn't sound like Leo's style. He's the type who never admits defeat until the very end. Miss Davis pushed up her glasses, a faint, cold smile on her face. He didn't have a choice, Miss Vance. Just yesterday, the court issued a ruling to freeze all bank accounts, securities accounts, and real estate registered under Leo Sterling's name and the name of Sterling Ventures. The reason given was suspected illegal transfer of marital assets and malicious evasion of impending debts. I raised an eyebrow. That was a move I hadn't expected. I looked at Miss Davis. My father's doing? Miss Davis nodded discreetly. The chairman merely provided the necessary leads and evidence. It was mainly because Mr. Sterling, in his attempts to save his company, had engaged in several irregular related party transactions and asset pledges. His methods were not clean and left a lot of loose ends. We simply acted on the opportunity. I understood. When a wall starts to crumble, everyone gives it a push. The Vance family had fired the first shot. The vultures, the banks, the creditors, even his former partners smelling blood, would naturally flock to tear him apart. Freezing his assets was just the final straw that broke him, leaving him with no capital to even put up a fight. What about the car? I asked. The Maybach was, in a way, the beginning of all this. Our people have already retrieved the car from his company's parking garage. It has been fully detailed and serviced and is now in the West Wing garage. Here are the keys and the documents. Miss. Davis pushed a car key and a folder towards me. I looked at the familiar key fob, feeling nothing. This car had once carried my foolish fantasies about him and had also witnessed my most humiliating moment. Now it was back, like a trophy, and also like a pillar of shame, a constant reminder of my past blindness. Get rid of it, I said, pushing the key back. I don't want it. Sell it, and donate the money to a foundation for the protection of women and children. Miss Davis was slightly taken aback, then resumed her professional demeanor. Of course, Miss Vance. I will handle it promptly. And his current situation? I finally asked, not out of concern, but merely to confirm the state of the prey. Miss Davis's tone remained flat, but the details were chilling. Not good. The company is completely shut down, employees have scattered, banks and private creditors are hounding him daily. It's said he's about to lose the apartment he's living in due to a large mortgage. He has been officially blacklisted as a debtor, with restrictions on high-end consumption. No flights, no high-speed trains. Furthermore, it seems his own family is now full of resentment towards him due to the debts and the previous public spectacle. I listened quietly, as if hearing a news report about a stranger. Abandoned by everyone, with nowhere to go. That was Leo Sterling's reality now. It had happened even faster than I had imagined. Have him sign the final version of the divorce agreement, I said, putting down my teacup. Finalize the procedures as soon as possible. I don't want any legal connection to this man anymore. Understood. I will expedite the process. Miss Davis packed her documents and stood up. Miss Vance, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. I nodded. Thank you for your hard work, Miss Davis. After she left, I was alone in the solarium. The autumn sun was warm. I walked over to the baby stroller. My son was awake, his big, dark eyes curiously watching the shifting patterns of light above him. I leaned down and gently touched his soft cheek. Baby, I whispered, Mommy will clean up all the nasty people and things very soon. From now on, it will just be us, and Grandpa and Grandma who love us. The little one seemed to understand, waving his little fists and giggling. His pure, innocent smile instantly dispelled the last bit of gloom that had lingered in my heart from hearing about Leo's situation. Miss Davis was incredibly efficient. 3 days later, the final divorce agreement was ready, and a time and place for the signing were arranged. The venue was a conference room in a luxury hotel owned by the Vance Group, distant enough to be impersonal, yet formal enough to ensure the entire process was legally sound, leaving no loose ends. On the day of the signing, I woke up early. I chose a tailored, elegant, cream-colored suit and applied light makeup, making myself look energetic and confident. I wasn't going to plead or argue. I was going to end a mistake and take back what was mine. My mother held my well-dressed son and saw me to the door, her eyes filled with both heartache and support. Come back soon. I've asked the kitchen to prepare your favorite soup. I kissed my son's soft cheek. I will, right after it's done. Arthur drove me and Miss Davis to the hotel. The ride was quiet. Miss Davis went over the key clauses and the signing procedure with me one last time. I listened, my mind completely at peace. At the hotel, we were escorted to a private elevator that took us directly to the top-floor conference room. It was spacious and luxuriously decorated, with huge floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the bustling city. My legal team and representatives from the Vance Group's legal department were already seated on one side of the long conference table. Shortly after we arrived, the door opened, and the hotel manager respectfully led two people in. It was Leo and his lawyer. In just over a week, Leo looked like a different person. His once perfectly styled hair was greasy and messy. His eyes were sunken, his face was ashen, and he hadn't shaved. The suit he wore was wrinkled, as if it had been pulled from the bottom of a suitcase. He was hunched over, his eyes darting around, completely devoid of the forced, young, elite persona he used to carry. The lawyer following him also looked defeated. Seeing me already seated at the head of the table, composed and confident, Leo stopped in his tracks. His complex gaze lingered on my face for a few seconds, a mixture of resentment, shame, and perhaps a trace of regret he wouldn't even admit to himself. Miss Davis stood up and, in a businesslike manner, gestured. Mr. Sterling, please have a seat here. Leo and his lawyer sat down across the long table from us, a wide, unbridgeable gap between us. Miss Davis, as my representative, began to briefly state the terms of the agreement, her voice clear and composed. When she read the clauses about permanently waiving visitation rights and the enormous compensation amount, Leo's fist clenched so tight the veins on the back of his hand bulged. He looked up at me sharply, his lips trembling, as if he wanted to say something. "Isabella," he began, his voice hoarse, with a hint of pleading. Do you have to be so ruthless? The child, he is my son, after all. And that money, I really can't pay it right now." I said nothing, just looked at him calmly, my eyes showing no emotion. Miss Davis immediately interjected, her tone unyielding. "Mr. Sterling, the terms of this agreement were confirmed after consultation between both parties' lawyers and are legally binding. As for the compensation, we have a substantial chain of evidence to prove its reasonableness. If you have objections, we can opt for litigation. However, I must remind you that given your currently frozen assets and your status as a blacklisted debtor, litigation would be even more unfavorable for you." Leo's lawyer gently tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Leo, just sign it. This is the best possible outcome at this point." Leo seemed to deflate completely, slumping into his chair. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking violently, making a suppressed, choked sound. He was crying. Was it regret, despair, or resentment? I didn't know, and I didn't care. The conference room was silent, save for his muffled sobs and the faint sounds of the city outside. My legal team sat stone-faced, accustomed to such scenes. After a minute or two, Leo wiped his face roughly with his hand and looked up, his eyes red. He stared at me, the last bit of pleading in his eyes turning into pure venom. "Isabella, you're truly heartless." I was blind. I remained silent, just lifting my chin slightly. "Miss Davis, please continue." Miss Davis pushed 2 thick copies of the agreement to the center of the table, along with an expensive fountain pen. "If there are no other issues, please sign." Leo's trembling hand reached for the pen, which seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He glanced at the signature line at the end of the agreement, then looked up at me one last time, his gaze as if trying to burn my image into his memory. Finally, he lowered his head and, with what seemed like all his strength, signed his name. The signature was crooked and shaky. After signing, as if completely drained, he tossed the pen aside, leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes, refusing to look at anyone. His lawyer checked the signature and added his own. Then, Miss Davis passed the agreement to me. I picked up another pen and, without any hesitation, signed my name, Isabella Vance, in a smooth, firm hand. The characters were clear and strong. After signing, I put down the pen and nodded at Miss Davis. Miss Davis collected the agreements. We will handle the remaining procedures promptly. Mr. Sterling, regarding the transfer of the Maybach and the payment method for the compensation, my assistant will communicate the details with your lawyer. Goodbye. With the divorce agreement signed, it was like hitting a critical delete button. Back at the estate, life entered a new phase, stable, peaceful, filled with the busy joy of a new baby. I never heard any news about Leo Sterling again. He and his family seemed to have vanished from my life. The weather gradually turned cooler. The leaves on the trees in the estate turned brilliant shades of gold and red. My son changed and grew every day. He could laugh, make clearer sounds, and his little limbs were getting stronger. He could lie in his crib and wave them around for ages. Most of my days revolved around him, learning all sorts of parenting skills from the nurse, and I was happy. One afternoon, I was holding my son by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the ginkgo leaves fall, when Miss Davis came again. This time, she brought a file and the final news. Miss Vance, all legal procedures for the divorce have been completed. Here is the final divorce decree and the asset division confirmation. Miss Davis handed me the file, her face showing the relief of having completed a major task. The Maybach has been sold as per your wishes, and the proceeds have been donated to the account you specified. As for Mr. Sterling's first compensation payment, although it falls far short of the agreed amount, we have used legal means to secure a lien on his potential future income and will continue to pursue it. I took the file but didn't open it. The black and white text was just a formal end to the past. Any recent news from his side? I asked casually, out of a detached curiosity about the final destination of a piece of trash that had been disposed of. Miss Davis pushed up her glasses, her tone as calm as if reporting a routine matter. From what we've gathered, Mr. Sterling's last remaining property, the apartment you used to live in, was foreclosed on by the bank 3 days ago to cover part of his debts. His current whereabouts are unknown. He is said to be temporarily staying with a distant relative, but it seems that has also caused friction. He has been officially blacklisted as a debtor, with restrictions on high-end consumption, preventing him from taking flights or trains, or staying in star-rated hotels. I nodded. I understood. Abandoned by everyone, with nowhere to go. That was likely his current reality. It had happened even faster than I'd anticipated. The final chapter of his downfall had arrived. Additionally, Miss Davis added, a hint of irony in her voice. After the public spectacle they created, his mother and sister also seemed to feel they had no face left to show in the city. They moved out of their original residence and reportedly went back to their hometown. Before they left, they apparently had a huge argument with Mr. Sterling over his debts. I gently patted my son's back. He was dozing off in my arms. Hearing this, I felt nothing. It was just a predictable case of dogs biting dogs. Thank you for your hard work, Miss Davis. Please handle any follow-up matters as you see fit, I said coolly. Of course, Miss Vance. I'll take my leave now. Miss Davis respectfully stood up and left. I carried my son to the nursery and gently placed him in his soft crib. He waved his little hands and cooed, playing by himself. The sunlight, filtered through the curtains, cast a soft glow on his rosy cheeks. I stood by his crib, looking at his pure, innocent face, my heart completely at peace. All the toxic people and painful memories had finally been purged from my life. From now on, my world would be filled with only sunlight and beauty. At dinner, I told my parents that the divorce was finalized. My mother beamed, saying, "Good, good," repeatedly, and immediately asked the kitchen to add a few more dishes to celebrate. My father showed little reaction, just nodding. Then, as if remembering something, he said to me, "Isabella, let the past be the past. You're still young, and you have a long road ahead of you. Have you thought about what you want to do once you've fully recovered? Something you enjoy? Or perhaps come help me at the company? You could start by learning the ropes." I thought for a moment. I had lost myself for Leo and that so-called family. It was time to plan for my future, not to prove a point to anyone, but for myself and my son. "Dad, I want to focus on the baby for now and get my health back completely. As for work," I smiled, "maybe in a little while." I might actually want to see what I'm capable of. A look of approval appeared in William's eyes. No rush. Take your time. The Vance family will always be your support. After dinner, I pushed the stroller and walked with my mother in the twilight garden. The evening breeze was cool but fresh. My mother held my arm, chattering about which friend's child was adorable, or which socialite had recently achieved something remarkable, her voice full of hope for the future. Time flew by. Soon, it was my son's 100-day celebration. The little guy had grown plump and cheerful, and he was the darling of the Vance estate. My life revolved around him, watching him explore the world, my heart full. There was no room left for the unpleasantness of the past. I deliberately avoided asking about Leo, but some information still trickled in through various channels. After all, a once promising young entrepreneur who had fallen so spectacularly was bound to become gossip fodder. One day, I was in the conservatory with my son when my cousin Dylan came running in, his face alight with the excitement of sharing gossip. "Sis, guess what I heard at dinner with friends yesterday?" Dylan leaned in, his eyes sparkling. I was dangling a colorful rattle to amuse my son. "What did you hear?" I asked without looking up. "Another celebrity scandal?" "Not a celebrity. It's, you know who. Leo Sterling." Dylan's voice was filled with unconcealed glee. My hand paused for a second, then resumed shaking the rattle. My tone was flat. "What about him?" Seeing my lack of reaction, Dylan was a bit disappointed, but he couldn't wait to continue. "Man, it's bad. My friend's dad works in debt collection. He said Leo owes a fortune, bank loans, private loans, all adding up to..." He held up a few fingers, basically an amount he can never pay back in this lifetime. He's officially blacklisted, can't take planes or trains, can't even stay in a decent hotel. Heard he tried to find a respectable job recently, but they did a background check and immediately turned him down. I grunted, indicating I was listening. This was all expected. Dylan, encouraged, continued with more enthusiasm. And get this, his parents and sister had a massive fight with him over the debt, and just packed up and went back to their hometown. They even said they disowned him, afraid he'd drag them down further. He's apparently crashing at some distant great-uncle's place now, in one of those run-down old neighborhoods in the West End. Heard he even got into a fight with a roommate over utility bills and almost got thrown out. My son giggled at the sound of the rattle. I smiled along with him, squeezing his chubby little hand. Leo Sterling, abandoned by his family, living on someone's charity, fighting over a few dollars for utilities. The scene was even more pathetic than I had imagined. But so what? What did it have to do with me? Dylan was still marveling. It's really true what they say, fortunes can turn on a dime. I remember him driving your Maybach, acting like he owned the world. And now, look at him. Sis, you were so smart to leave him when you did. Otherwise, you'd be suffering and paying off his debts right now. I looked up at Dylan, my tone serious. Dylan, from now on, you don't need to tell me anything about him. Whether he's doing well or miserably, he's a stranger now. He's not worth another moment of our time. Dylan was taken aback, then scratched his head with an embarrassed smile. "Oh, right. I get it, sis. I just thought it was satisfying, you know." "There's nothing to be satisfied about," I said coolly. "He chose his own path, so he bears the consequences. We just need to live our own lives well." Just then, the nurse came to say it was time for the baby's nap. I nodded and handed my son to her. As she carried him away, Dylan also stood up. Well, I should get going too. Work to do. The conservatory was quiet again, filled with sunlight and the fragrance of flowers. I walked over to a blooming orchid and gently touched its petals. The news Dylan brought was like a small pebble dropped into a calm lake. It created a small ripple, then disappeared. Leo's miserable state didn't bring me joy. It was more like a confirmation of how right I had been to leave. He was like a piece of rotten flesh I had surgically removed. Whether it was now festering in the mud or being eaten by worms had no effect on me. My attention, my energy, should be focused on better, more constructive things. That evening at a family dinner, my mother excitedly discussed plans for a grand 100-day banquet for her grandson, inviting all our relatives and friends. My father, though quiet, clearly approved. I smiled and agreed. "Of course, Mom. You can handle the planning. Just let me know if you need me to do anything. Watching my parents busily plan for their grandson's celebration, watching my son grow healthier and happier every day, I truly understood what was important in life. My son's 100-day banquet was even grander than I had imagined. A section of the Vance estate was open to guests for the rare occasion. It was a glittering affair, filled with the business partners, associates, and close friends of the Vance family. Everyone, whether sincere or just polite, offered their blessings to the little life who was the center of so much love and attention. I wore a custom-made gown my mother had commissioned, holding my son, who was dressed like a little prince. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations. The little one wasn't shy at all, his big dark eyes curiously looking around. He would even flash a toothless grin at those who cooed at him, melting the hearts of everyone present. "Isabella, the baby looks just like you. Look at those big, bright eyes," an old family friend said, holding my hand. "William, this is truly a double blessing for you. Your daughter is back, and you have such a bright grandson." Another business associate congratulated my father. I smiled and made polite conversation, gracefully accepting the compliments. I used to find such occasions unfamiliar, even off-putting, thinking them superficial. But my perspective had completely changed. I was standing here not as an appendage to someone else, but as Isabella Vance, as my son's mother, confidently accepting all that was rightfully ours. During a lull in the party, I took my son out to a quieter balcony for some fresh air. The evening breeze was gentle, dispersing the noise from the ballroom. Dylan came over with a glass of juice for me, his voice low, still unable to contain his urge to gossip. "Sis, guess who I heard my dad and his friends talking about just now?" I glanced at him, already guessing. "I don't want to." Dylan chuckled and continued anyway. "It was Leo Sterling, of course. Heard that distant great-uncle of his also got tired of his bad luck and kicked him out. He's supposedly renting a single room in some slum in the North End now. No one even knows exactly where. Creditors used to be able to find him, but now he's just vanished, probably hiding somewhere. It's like he just fell off the face of the earth." I gently patted my son's back, looking at the city lights in the distance, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Oh." Dylan looked at my calm profile, seemingly a bit disappointed, but couldn't help but add, "Sis, you've really moved on. If it were me, I'd have to find him, see how miserable he is, and spit in his face to feel better." I turned to look at him, my voice serious. "Dylan, when you're standing high enough, you don't look down at the pebbles in the mud puddles. How he's living his life is no longer worth any of my emotions. I'd rather spend that time with my son, or thinking about how to better myself." Dylan was stunned for a moment, then scratched his head, nodding as if he half understood. "I guess that makes sense." Just then, my mother came over and smilingly took my drowsy son from my arms. "Let Grandma hold him. You go get some rest. Isabella, go say hi to Mr. and Mrs. Williams. They were just asking about you." "Okay." I smoothed my dress and walked back into the brilliantly lit ballroom. Everywhere I looked, there was prosperity and praise. I knew this was supported by the power and wealth of the Vance family, but more importantly, I had rediscovered my own confidence and dignity. The banquet concluded perfectly. After seeing off the last guest, the estate returned to its usual tranquility. I was exhausted, but felt a deep sense of fulfillment and joy. A few days later, my father suddenly asked me, "Isabella, there's a business gala next Wednesday. It's a pretty high-profile event, with a lot of influential people attending. Are you interested in coming with me? Just to relax and get to know the scene." I hesitated. It had been a long time since I had attended such a formal social event. Seeing the anticipation in my father's eyes and thinking about my own plans for the future, I nodded. "Okay, I'll go." On the night of the gala, I chose a simple but elegant black evening gown and wore delicate makeup. The woman in the mirror had lost her former timidity and gained a composed and mature aura. The gala was held in the ballroom of a top-tier hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers cast a dazzling light. Well-dressed men and women chatted in low voices, holding champagne glasses. The air was filled with a mix of perfume, wine, and the scent of opportunity. I walked in on my father's arm, and he introduced me to several important business partners. I did my best to remember their faces and names, making polite small talk. My father seemed pleased with my performance, occasionally giving me a look of approval. Halfway through the evening, I found a quiet corner to rest for a moment, when a gentle male voice sounded beside me. "Miss Vance?" I turned to see a man in a deep blue suit, with a refined and steady demeanor. He was in his mid-30s, with handsome features and clear, intelligent eyes. I was sure I didn't know him. "Hello, I'm Isabella Vance. And you are?" I maintained a polite smile. The man smiled slightly and handed me a business card. "Pardon the intrusion, Miss Vance. My name is Grant Ellison, founder of Ellison Capital. I've long admired Mr. Vance and yourself. It's an honor to finally meet you." I took the card. The title and company name both exuded competence. "Mr. Ellison, a pleasure." I nodded slightly. Grant's gaze was appreciative but not intrusive. "I saw you with Mr. Vance earlier. Your presence is truly remarkable. You are even more impressive in person than the rumors suggest." He paused, as if searching for the right word. "More radiant." I had heard plenty of compliments, but Grant's tone was sincere and not at all slick. I smiled. "You're too kind, Mr. Ellison." We chatted for a bit about innocuous industry trends and the gala itself. Grant was a skillful conversationalist, knowledgeable without being boastful, making the interaction very comfortable. He was completely different from Leo, who had always been desperate to prove his worth. I learned that Grant had recently returned from abroad, and his firm specialized in high-tech investments with great success. He seemed to know a fair bit about the Vance Group's businesses, but asked his questions with tact. "I heard Miss Vance studied abroad for a while, and only recently returned," Grant asked casually. I knew he had likely heard something about my past, but his version was either incomplete or he was deliberately avoiding the sensitive parts. I went along with it. "Yes, I've been back for some time, mainly to be with my family." "Family is the most important thing," Grant agreed, then smoothly changed the subject. After a little while, my father signaled to me from across the room, wanting to introduce me to someone else. I gave Grant an apologetic smile. "Mr. Ellison, excuse me. It seems my father needs me." "Of course, Miss Vance. Please." Grant bowed slightly and held out his phone, displaying a QR code for adding a contact. "I hope we'll have the chance to connect more in the future. Perhaps we could even collaborate on some projects." His gesture was natural and pressure-free. I hesitated for a second, then took out my phone and scanned his code. After all, knowing a capable and courteous person in the industry was never a bad thing. "Goodbye, Mr. Ellison." "Goodbye, Miss Vance. I look forward to our next meeting." As I walked away, I could feel his gaze on me for a moment, but he didn't linger. When I reached my father, he asked in a low voice, "How was your chat with Grant Ellison?" "It was nice. He's very well-mannered," I replied honestly. William nodded. "That kid is a real talent. Self-made, sharp eye, and steady. A lot better than some who are all style and no substance." I knew who my father was referring to and didn't comment, but my impression of Grant improved even more. After the gala, Grant didn't bother me frequently. He would occasionally share information about art exhibitions or industry articles he thought I might find interesting. His messages were always perfectly timed and maintained a comfortable distance. Sometimes I would reply, sometimes I would just read them. This mature, measured approach was a world away from Leo's impatient pursuit. I started paying more attention to financial news and would sometimes ask my father about the company's business. William was happy to teach me, explaining complex concepts with clarity. I discovered that I wasn't clueless about business. In fact, I found a strategic pleasure in it, like playing a game of chess. Maybe I could really try my hand at it in the future. One afternoon, I was watching a financial news channel while playing with blocks with my son when my phone rang. It was Grant. I was a bit surprised. We had only communicated through text before. "Miss Vance, sorry to bother you." Grant's warm, steady voice came through the phone. "I was wondering if you're free tomorrow afternoon. I have 2 tickets to the new play at the National Theater, a classic production. The director and cast are outstanding. I thought you might be interested." I was taken aback. A play was a unique invitation, not as cliché as dinner, but more interactive than an art gallery. I looked at my son, who was happily crawling on the floor, and hesitated. Grant seemed to sense my hesitation and quickly added, "Of course, if it's not a good time, that's perfectly fine. Or, if you don't mind, you could bring your son along. I've heard that exposing children to artistic atmospheres is beneficial. My little nephew once went to a children's play with me and had a great time." His words were both sincere and considerate, cleverly diffusing any potential awkwardness of bringing a child. It was hard to refuse such a thoughtful invitation. I checked my schedule. Tomorrow afternoon was free. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Ellison. I'm free. But it might be a bit noisy with the baby." "Not a problem. The point is to enjoy the art. No need to be formal," Grant said with a laugh. "Then I'll see you at the National Theater at 2 p.m. tomorrow." "Great. See you tomorrow." After hanging up, I had a strange feeling. Not infatuation, but a mild curiosity about a new experience. After leaving Leo, I had mostly confined myself to the world of the estate and my son. Grant's appearance was like a window opening, letting in some fresh air. The next day, I chose a comfortable yet chic outfit. Arthur drove me and my son to the theater. Grant was already waiting by the entrance. He wore a casual blazer without a tie, looking less like a businessman and more like a relaxed scholar. He greeted us warmly, his eyes first landing on my son. "What a handsome little man. He has your eyes very bright." Then he turned to me. "Miss Vance, this way." He didn't offer to hold the baby or act strangely about me bringing him to a play. Everything felt natural. Our seats were in a good spot. Before the play started, my son looked around curiously, cooing occasionally. Grant wasn't annoyed at all. He would even lean over to playfully interact with him. As the lights dimmed and the play began, Grant watched intently, but would share a brief, insightful comment with me during scene changes. I found that I could not only keep up with him but also offer my own perspectives. This kind of intellectual connection was something I had never had in my marriage. My son fell asleep in my arms partway through. Grant noticed and quietly suggested I use the small blanket I had brought to cover him. The entire 3-hour play was a wonderful experience. When we left, it was getting dark. "How was it?" Grant asked. "It was fantastic. A true classic. And the adaptation was brilliant," I said sincerely. "I agree," Grant nodded. "It's getting late. Would you like to get something to eat? I know a great Cantonese restaurant nearby. It's quiet and suitable for children." I looked at my sleeping son, then at Grant's sincere expression, and this time, I didn't hesitate. "Okay, that would be lovely." The restaurant was as elegant as he had described. We had a private room, and the food was exquisite. Grant was an excellent conversationalist, guiding the topics from the play to travel to interesting anecdotes, carefully avoiding any personal or sensitive areas. The entire meal was relaxed and enjoyable. After dinner, he insisted on walking us to the car. He waited until my son and I were safely inside Arthur's car before waving goodbye. Through the rear window, I saw him standing there until our car turned a corner. His gentlemanly conduct was impeccable. Back home, after putting my son to bed, I stood by the window, looking out at the night. The afternoon's experience was like a soft, new color added to the canvas of my life. Grant Ellison was mature, steady, considerate, and cultured. Most importantly, he made me feel respected as an individual. It was a long-lost, wonderful feeling. I didn't know if this was the beginning of a new romance, and I was in no hurry to define it. But it confirmed that leaving Leo was the best decision I had ever made. The world was vast, and there were many wonderful people and things to appreciate. I didn't have to be trapped in the shadows of the past. My new life was quietly unfolding in a brighter, more expansive direction. And the last lingering shadow of Leo Sterling, in contrast to the fresh air Grant had brought, seemed all the more decayed and insignificant, about to be blown away by the wind for good. After the play and dinner with Grant, life continued without any dramatic changes. We maintained our unhurried contact, mostly texting about shared interests like exhibitions, books, or general industry observations. He always kept a perfect distance, never making me feel pressured or distant. I grew accustomed to this subtle connection. He was like a pleasant seasoning in my life, expanding my world beyond just the estate and my son. I began to read financial magazines more often and even took the initiative to visit the Vance Group headquarters to understand its operations. William was very supportive, assigning his chief assistant to give me a tour. Standing in the top floor office, looking down at the city, a new feeling stirred within me. This was the empire my father had built. I, too, could stand at such heights and view the world, instead of being trapped in a small apartment, bickering over trivial matters. One day, as I was discussing new clothes for my son with my mother, I received a text from Grant. It was a link to an art exhibition. This exhibit is quite good. The curator is a friend of mine. There are some very inspiring pieces by emerging artists. If you're interested, we could go this weekend. I opened the link. It was my style. Just as I was about to reply, another message popped up. It was from a college classmate I hadn't spoken to in a long time. The message was abrupt. Isabella, are you doing okay? I was in the old West End district yesterday, and I think I saw Leo Sterling. He's changed so much, I almost didn't recognize him. Just thought I'd let you know. No other reason. I paused, my finger hovering over the screen. The old West End district, a once thriving but now dilapidated area of the city, full of cheap rental apartments and small workshops. Leo had fallen that far. I felt nothing, not even curiosity. It was like hearing a piece of news about a complete stranger. I calmly closed the message without replying, then switched back to my chat with Grant. Sounds good. I'm free this weekend. You can decide on the specific time and place. Putting down my phone, I continued my discussion with my mother about whether to buy the blue bear patterned onesie or the one with the little yellow ducks. The news about Leo was like a speck of dust that failed to cast even the faintest shadow on my bright mood. That weekend, I went to the art exhibition with Grant. He was truly knowledgeable, offering insightful commentary and interesting anecdotes from art history. Afterwards, we sat in a cafe near the gallery. The sunlight streamed in, creating a peaceful atmosphere. As we chatted about the city's changes, Grant mentioned casually, "The West End is old, but it has a lot of character. I sometimes go to the old book market there. You can find some real gems." His words were unintentional, but they made me think of my classmate's message. Leo was in the West End. Grant also went to the West End. These two names, which should have had no connection, were now linked by a casual remark in a strangely ironic way. I took a sip of my coffee, my tone as casual as if I were commenting on the weather. "Oh, really? I've never been. I heard it can be a bit rough over there." Grant smiled. "It's a mixed bag, for sure, but it's fine if you stick to the main areas during the day. Why? Are you interested? I could be your guide next time. I'll ensure your safety." I shook my head, smiling. Not at the moment, just a passing thought. I looked at his gentle, calm face, then thought of my classmate's description of a barely recognizable Leo. The stark contrast brought a fleeting, faint sense of pity, which was quickly replaced by a much stronger feeling of none of my business. Grant seemed to notice my momentary distraction but was considerate enough not to press the issue, smoothly changing the topic to a book he was currently reading. Watching his confident profile in the sunlight, I realized this was how a normal person's life should be: positive, ambitious, full of light. As for Leo, he had chosen a path of selfishness, cruelty, and short-sightedness. The dark corner he was now struggling in was entirely of his own making. After coffee, Grant drove me home. As we neared the estate, he said, "Miss Vance, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. You're not quite what I expected." "Oh? How so?" I was curious. He chose his words carefully, his gaze sincere. "You're more resilient than the rumors suggest, and more insightful. There's a clarity about you that comes from having weathered storms, yet you've maintained an inner purity." "It's very rare." I smiled but didn't reply. Perhaps he was right. Those storms, in hindsight, had only served to wash away the superficialities and help me see things for what they were. The car stopped at the estate gate. I thanked him and got out. Grant rolled down the window. "Let's go to another exhibition or a concert again soon." "Okay," I nodded. As I watched his car drive away, I turned and walked through the gates. The setting sun cast a long shadow behind me. I knew that my story with Grant might just be beginning, or it might just be a pleasant interlude. Regardless, it was a positive possibility, pointing towards warmth and light. And any news about Leo Sterling, whether he was holed up in the West End or homeless on the streets, could no longer stir any emotion in me. He was like a closed book, gathering dust in a corner, its contents uninspired, its ending abrupt. He didn't even deserve to be reopened. His miserable present was the final chapter he had written for himself, and my story was just beginning a new, promising volume. We were on two parallel lines that would never cross again. His darkness and mire only highlighted the sunshine and smooth path ahead of me, and that was enough. The days passed like turning pages in a book, calm and fulfilling. My son grew bigger every day, learning to say mama and taking his first wobbly steps, becoming the joy of the entire estate. I had fully recovered, and my mood was better than ever. My interactions with Grant continued at a comfortable, natural pace. We attended exhibitions, concerts, and occasionally met for a quiet afternoon tea. Our conversations gradually deepened from arts and current events to more personal topics like our upbringings and vague ideas for the future. He remained respectful and patient, never crossing any lines or putting pressure on me. I could feel a subtle understanding growing between us, slow and steady like melting snow in spring. One day, Grant invited me to an exhibition on future urban design. It was held on the top floor of a new skyscraper downtown, offering a spectacular view. After viewing the exhibits, we stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the vibrant city below, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Sometimes, standing here makes you feel so small, Grant said quietly. But at the same time, it feels like everyone has a chance to leave their own mark on this grand canvas. I nodded in agreement. My world used to be just Leo and that cramped apartment. Now, standing here, I could truly feel the vastness of the world. What are your plans for the future? Grant turned to me, his gaze warm and focused. Besides taking care of your son, have you thought about doing something you enjoy or are good at? I paused. I had been thinking about this a lot lately. My father had suggested I learn the ropes at the company, but I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about just fitting into the family business. I preferred a more independent path. I might try my hand at some investing, I said, testing the waters. Not large-scale funds, but finding small, interesting projects or startups with potential. Something like an angel investor. Grant's eyes lit up. That's a great direction. It requires a unique vision and a lot of patience. With your background and intuition, you might be very well suited for it. He paused, then said, half-jokingly, would you consider collaborating on our first project? I'm currently looking at a few promising ventures in the creative industries. I smiled. Are you trying to recruit me, Mr. Ellison? Not at all, Grant said sincerely. I'm inviting a potentially excellent partner. Of course, you can take your time to think about it. We smiled at each other, a silent understanding passing between us. This feeling of moving forward together, of shared exploration, was wonderful. After the exhibition, Grant drove me home. As the car stopped at the estate gate and I got out, he rolled down the window and bid me a warm farewell as usual. Watching his taillights disappear into the twilight, I took a deep breath of the cool, fresh air, my heart calm and clear. Back in the main house, my parents were playing with my son in the living room. The little one saw me and immediately rushed over, arms outstretched, babbling mama. I scooped him up, feeling his solid weight and complete trust. You're back. How was your time with the Ellison boy? My mother asked with a knowing smile. It was nice, I replied simply, kissing my son's cheek, but the joy in my voice was unmistakable. William put down his newspaper and looked at me. He didn't ask about Grant, but changed the subject. Next month, the group is launching a new charitable foundation focused on supporting single mothers and children. Are you interested in taking on an honorary director position? It would be a good starting point. I was momentarily stunned, then understood my father's intention. He was paving the way for me, giving me a platform to contribute to society while gaining experience and prestige. It was a much more respectful and clever approach than just giving me money or a management position. Yes, I nodded, a warmth spreading through my heart. Thank you, Dad. That night, after putting my son to sleep, I went to the rooftop terrace of the main house. From here, I could see the entire estate and the glittering lights of the distant city. The cool night breeze blew through my hair. I leaned against the railing, looking at the kingdom my family had built, and at the vast world beyond, filled with the struggles and dreams of countless people. I was once trapped in a small corner, thinking it was the entire world, suffering injustice and humiliation. Now, I stood here, holding the power to choose, surrounded by a loving family and a healthy, growing child, with a future full of possibilities ahead of me. The name Leo Sterling, and all the dark memories he brought, had long been crushed to dust by time and reality. Perhaps he was still struggling in some dark corner, or perhaps he had completely sunk into despair, but it no longer had anything to do with me. With his own narrow-mindedness and cruelty, he had severed all paths to a brighter future. And I, Isabella Vance, after getting lost, being hurt, and awakening, had finally taken back control of my life. I was no longer an accessory to anyone. I was the master of my own fate, my son's strongest support. The road ahead was long. There would be challenges and new landscapes, but I knew that no matter what, I would no longer be afraid. I would no longer retreat, because in my world, I make the rules. The night sky was deep, dotted with stars, mirroring the city lights below. I faced the wind, lifted my chin slightly, and smiled. A new chapter had begun, and this time, I was the one holding the pen. Dear listeners, after hearing this story, what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment for the author. We hope you will share this with fellow story lovers. Thank you again for listening to The Crossroads. We look forward to seeing you next time.